So I ended right at the end of the song, but then I could not get my mic to work. Okay. And then I had double feedback. For some reason, the mic was turned on, or the volume was turned on my Twitch. Ah! Happy Monday, you guys. All right. So I'm fixing up my other screen here. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I did. The weather could not have been more beautiful this weekend, and today I feel like I'm bragging. I think today, right now, it is like 71 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, maybe a few clouds in the sky, but just perfect, beautiful, breezy. And it was that way this weekend. It wasn't hot. It was just perfect. And so Saturday, I went to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival, which is the second largest of such a thing in the U.S. The The largest one is in Rhinebeck, New York, and the Maryland one is the second largest. It's been around. It might be the oldest. I'm not sure if Rhinebeck is older, but I kind of feel like the Maryland is the oldest one, even though it's not the biggest. It is my age. It was started in 1973, and yeah, they've been going strong ever since. So, thanks, Druid. Um, so it's always a fun thing to go to. It's been a while since I have gone. It usually coincides with other May related things I have to do. Like my husband's birthday is this month, my nephew's birthday is this month. Um, there's a festival that we often go to that happens in May. So a lot of times there would be things that would be in the way and I wouldn't make it. So I was very excited to make it this year. I went by myself, but I met up with a friend who is a teacher, and had some students there, but we hung out and the students went and did their own thing. So it was a lot of fun. I have a few pictures. I don't know. I guess there was just so much happening there. It was very busy, very crowded. And so, like I tried to get pictures of things that were interesting to me, but um, I don't know. I'll show them to you. There's just a few. So, but I did see a product that is so cool. My friend bought one, a little above my price point at the moment, but it is the coolest thing. And I think some of you that are into other types of needlework and textile type stuff are going to think this is very cool. So I will show you that. Very quickly, I also have the rest of my Jonathan Adler kits from Michaels. And I'll be honest, they're the two that I was kind of very curious about are not too shabby. Um and I'm not gonna do any reviews of this stuff today or really show off any of this stuff today, but I just have to show you. I got the baboon. And really the only reason I got the baboon crochet kit is just because it is terrifying looking. It is so weird. Um I never would have guessed that this is a baboon had it not said so on the label. So and I'm looking to see, does it actually say this? It doesn't even say what it is on the packaging. It just says crochet kit. It doesn't even give you like an explanation of what it is. So I suspect I'm going to go ahead and just lay out some odds. I bet this is going to be a very highly clearanced project because people are going to look at it and go, what in the hell is that? Or they're going to go, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen, or the weirdest looking thing I've ever seen. It just kind of looks like a little alien. So we'll see. I'm actually very excited to make him. So we'll get to that later, but I'll talk about these things in a second. But I want to show you the pictures of the sheeps. Oh, I love sheep. They're very sweet creatures. They're sort of silly. They're not very smart. As your farm creatures go, they are not that like the super smartest of all of the farm animals, but they're sweet. And they're curious and they're just, I don't know, they're interesting. So let's take a look at my sheeps. So the place where the Woolen Sheep Festival takes place is the county fairgrounds. It's a county that's just south of me. Fairly wealthy county, so they have a very nice fairgrounds. And it's not as big as the state fairgrounds, but it's pretty big considering it's just a county fairgrounds. But so they have lots of agricultural like buildings and spaces, and so it's no big deal for them. They have all kinds of this sort of thing that happens throughout the year, so no big deal to have to quickly make these different I don't even know what you call them. They're like buildings, like they have a roof, but they don't really have sides. They kind of have gates around them. So they're for livestock. So they're quite used to having, livestock there. So it's an easy transition for them. And there's a couple of the buildings that they turn into, for vendors. And then vendors are all over the property too. So, and I guess like if you're a vendor of some like sort of high end thing like jewelry or charms, little things. You might not want to be like outside where, things are less controlled. So they have this big building, and I'm sure that it costs more for the vendors to set up a booth in there than it does on the grounds. But either way, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of things there to see. And obviously, if you are into spinning, knitting, crochet, any kind of yarn related project, you're gonna find something for you there. All sorts of like, wool products. So I purchased not much, just a couple of things, some felted wool fabric for rug hooking, and some wool embroidery floss, which is from a company that makes very nice wool embroidery floss. And that's pretty much all I got. And a t-shirt. I got a t-shirt while I was there. But yeah, there's just so many things to look at and see, and like fun goings on. That the people of this crowd, I would say this is like an outdoor quilt con in terms of funny t-shirts and the things like people wear. Apparently the last few years has been really popular, this like headband, and it has these two felted sheep ears on it, and then like this hunk of like the curly fleece like hanging from the front, like you would have bangs, and people were wearing those, and there were vendors selling them. So all kinds of like very just like lightheartedness, I guess. Not very serious. And I love that. So, but yeah, I mean, you can go in there and literally, like, there's one whole building where you buy recently shorn fleece. Like, it's not cleaned, it's not sorted, it's nothing. They've sheared it right off the sheep and put it in a big bag, and you can buy it. And it's all graded by like what kind of wool it is, like with the species, or not the species, but the, I guess, the variety of sheep, and how it was cared for, and so on and so forth will determine the prices of these fleeces. So interesting. It's very, very amazing. So what you see here in this picture, I can't remember I don't remember what any of the sheep were. I didn't take pictures of, this is this type of sheep, this is that type of sheep. There's dozens, I think, probably dozens of different varieties of sheep. And they all have different characteristics, like if you're spinning something, this variety of sheep makes better wool. If you're felting, this variety of sheep might be better. If you're just making like wool batting, I was like, what if I just wanted to make wool batting? Like I could kind of buy the trash wool. It doesn't have to necessarily be like this very long staple, you know. So it was interesting. And for a moment there, I thought, maybe I could get a bag of the cheap fleece, like a cheap fleece, and process it myself into batting. And I'm like, I'm still not completely done with my cotton project. Although I've done all the quilting on my little squares, I haven't bound them or anything. And I haven't put together the program that I was going to put together for that cotton program. So anyway, I was like, no, Stephanie, you can't start on another one. But it's definitely in the back of my mind, and perhaps one day I will do this. I will get my own bag of fleece and make a wool batting. But so what you see here, these are sheep, and they're coated, meaning they have a little coat. They have these cute little outfits they wear. And the purpose of this, I think, is probably pretty obvious. If you live anywhere near a rural area and maybe have seen animals, livestock out in the field, it's to keep their coats clean. Sheep, as their fleece grows and grows and grows, and it gets, it's very thick and dense, very it's just tight. And if they like brush against things, roll in things, it kind of like vegetable debris and dirt and things will kind of embed itself into their fleece. So these coats kind of keep them clean. The other thing I did not know is the backs of the sheep, if they're in full sun a lot, that it can bleach. I mean, just like your own hair. If you are living a temperate climate where you get to be outside a lot in full sun, your hair will start to bleach out. And so that's also can happen to these sheep. So if to preserve the color of their fleece and also to keep it clean, they're coated. So these are just your average looking like white sheep, I guess. And then there's this black one here. All right, come on. Here's some more. These guys are kind of small. Their coats were different. Um, Oh, hey, Druid. In the country, we call them rugs. Okay, sheep sunscreen. Right, exactly. That it is. So Druid, you're any of like the? Is it a rug for like all of the animals? Is it specifically sheep? Because like I've seen horses. Horses wear these kind of things too. I've seen them. Like I feel like for horses, it's more about keeping them warm, maybe. Um, Although you know what, I don't know enough about livestock, so I could be wrong about things. But um, one thing, it felt kind of like as we were walking around, it kind of felt like it was lunchtime because all the sheep were really interested in their bags of alfalfa and their little food bins than they were in interacting with the people. They were kind of like, ah, there's some people. Um, this guy was fun. Ah, look at him. He's like, or she, I'm not sure. It was like, ah. Um, so call them rugs for horses and pretty much for sheep too. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, like, we think of the terms of like a bed rug is like a small covering for your bed. A livestock rug, a rug would be a covering for your livestock. Or coats, yes. Yeah. So when we were looking at the fleece, there's all this information on the ticket that's stapled to the bag. And it's stuff like some of it I couldn't even understand what it was because I had no frame of reference, but like it would say uncoated, and uncoated meant the sheep had never had one of these little coats on. It had always been, so you're gonna find more debris in that bag of fleece than you might find, and if the sheep was coated. So, anywho, I just love this one. This just looks like a sheep, And you say to somebody, sheep. This is Here we go. Here's a black one. It's a sheep. This sheep was a monster, and I can tell you it is a Corriedale. Look at this thing. This woman is probably about my height, maybe a little bit shorter, and this sheep came up to like her chest. That's big for a sheep. You could see these over here are the more average sized sheeps that were, throughout these pens. So you can see this guy is a real big guy. We were kind of like hurrying to get to the next thing, so I didn't have a chance to talk to the people that were from this farm to find out what is the deal with this guy. Like, were they giving him Miracle Grow? Is he like some buff sheep? Is he getting like all those proteins or whatever? I don't know. But he was like just, I mean, it really looked like somebody just supersized a sheep. It was crazy. And he's very cute. Just, he's just all woolly and his little woolly legs and his little woolly hairdo. They're the best. All right, come on. Okay. This was very exciting. So they have the Icelandic, they're sort of I don't know why I keep saying cosplay. That's not what they're doing here. They're doing like living history. So it's like a living history thing. And I was a little bummed because I kind of expected it to have like more there, and I thought they were going to be outside too. So I don't know. Um, they had them here in this big barn. Um, so, Druid says throw a rug on him. Okay. So throw a rug on your livestock. That's what it means. It's a coat for the animal. So if you have read Elizabeth, what's her last name? Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years. um, Help me, you guys. It's Elizabeth, and I can't remember her last name. In any event, if you've read that book, you have seen the diagrams of these looms. Because in what the archaeology that she's talking about, images of these types of looms exist, and the rocks themselves exist, but this whole frame here, the uprights and everything, don't exist anymore because we're talking prehistoric days. And in this case, yes, thank you, Elizabeth Barber. She's brilliant. So yeah, Elizabeth Wayland Barber, and there was a re-release, like I know it's like the 20th or 25th anniversary of her book. I think it's the 20th anniversary of her book. So a Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years. If you haven't read it, I mean, it's kind of dense. It is academic, and I put that in finger quotes, in air quotes, because it is written by a smart lady for smarty pants people. But I don't think it's like so academic that it's unreadable. I think it's just one of those things that you have to take your time reading it because this is coming out of an academic mind. But So interesting. And again, like this is what the looms that she talks about, this is what they look like. And so you've got, this is your warp. And it's basically hung in, it's almost like a doorway. She kind of talks about, it's this, it could be up against a wall kind of, or it can be like in this doorway opening. And the warp yarns are grouped, and they have this rock with a hole drilled in it is tied as a weight for that group of warp threads. And I imagine there's something to do with the weight of the rock and the number of warp threads that are attached, because it would need to provide the right amount of tension. And you can see these rocks are all about the same size. So obviously chosen specifically, and I'm sure there's some kind of like river rock or something, but chosen specifically because they're all about the same size and shape, and therefore weight, so that they would have consistent tension on the warp threads. And then anything that they weave through here is the weft. And so you see here, this line you see here, it's kind of a messy line. That's, I think, at the bottom to kind of just sort of set the warp and kind of keep it from moving back and forth. It kind of just like straightens things up, I guess, or sort of, yeah, like you would with a quilt block, I guess, straightening things up. And of course, there's tons of people crowded around talking to the lady, so I'm like, nah. I didn't get a great picture, but this thing, I think it looked like it was like a shield. They had the other Viking stuff going on in the background. And then this is the other side. And you can see this is a weaving sword there to sort of beat and beat the weft down. You could see there's these sort of like hook things that are built into the uprights, that they can place these. It's almost like a heddle. This thing, they could pull it back and forth to open the shed. And if you remember, the shed is the space in between the warp strands, when they're pulled open in different directions, so that you pass your weft thread through, or yarn, or whatever it is that you're using. So this is like the most primitive version of a loom, other than say like a backstrap loom, or the kind that they literally do on the ground with stakes. Those are probably a little bit more primitive because they use less materials. I mean, it's literally like a stake and some string. And those are really primitive. But this is like, when you kind of go up in technology, like that next step up in technology, this is the most primitive version of like this full-blown loom. So it's just really interesting that, and I would guess that from the perspective of this Viking Icelandic sort of group, they've done the study in this, and they have, I guess, the receipts to show that this is what the, back in the, prehistoric times, before recorded history, that they would be using. And they were also dressed in traditional clothing. So this is their sheep. They had their own 2 sheep there, and they had made a little pen with I can't remember what this woven pieces of like wood that's all woven together that create this little pen for their sheep. These sheep, you can see they look a little different. Their their body size is maybe a little different, and their wool is slightly different than, say, other varieties of sheep. Of course, I'm not good at identifying all of this because this is not my world. But this also, they had this cool cart thing that was kind of just mocked up to look like it had product in it. And they had all of these other types of wooden sticks and rods and things for various uses. We were kind of hurrying through. But I just loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, they have their own sheep in here in this little pen. So cute. And this gentleman, very handsome guy. From what I understand, this was his first year as a baby daddy. This is in the general like display area, but apparently he had some lambs. He was the sire of several lambs that were there at a different display. So I thought that was interesting. I'm like, he should be very proud of himself. He's got some lovely little lambs that are his progeny. But he was very pretty in that his fleece, like over his body, was, just this long white fleece, but his legs and his face were spotted. So I thought that was really interesting, and I kind of wondered. I was like, well, when they shear him, is his body completely white? Is there any of this black fleece hiding anywhere, or is it just on his face and his legs? It's really interesting. And of course, he's got these, beautiful ram horns. And here's this poor little deer being sheared. She was yelling. I felt so bad for them. I mean, they're not being hurt in any way. Um, this, I think, is sort of the traditional like stand for shearing. And it's this little thing. It's like a little chin rest, and so they rest its snout there in that little upright thing, and it's got a little chain that goes around their head just to hold their head steady. I think if the sheep was really going to freak out, it probably could have gotten out of there. But it was just bellowing, like it was so annoyed. And then this lady, the tool that she is using, it is literally like you can see. It's kind of it's sort of like big flat pieces of metal. It has some tension in there, and the part that you can't see that she's got like up against the sheep is the shears, and they are literally like a giant pair of snips. Like if you've ever seen those embroidery snips that you just kind of squeeze them together and the blades sort of cross each other, that is what she's using to shear the sheep. And that is like a very traditional, it's not electric. It doesn't plug in. It is literally like a piece of metal that has been formed into these shears. And I actually have a pair of them, antique pair, and it's a very simple tool, but it's like I mean, I would say most sheep shearing does not happen that way. I would say most shepherds are probably shearing their sheep with an electric razor. They have a, specifically for shearing the sheep. Um, but the fact that they could still use this thing today, it's a tool that's still, test of time. Supposedly the woman that can shear a sheep in 2 minutes was there. I don't know where she was set up, so I didn't get to see her, but she holds the world record right now for shearing a sheep in like less than 2 minutes, which is good because the sheep they like to be sheared, I imagine, just to get the coat off their body, especially in the summer, I think. But yeah, no animal likes to be like locked down to be groomed. This was so cool. This was a display of it was specifically a group that um it's the black-faced Leicester, which was like the breed of the year for this year's Wool and Sheep Festival. So they had this oh yes, I'm sorry. This was Scottish blackface, not Leicester blackface. In any event, it's the Leicester blackface was the sheep of the year for this year's festival. This was this group that had all of these like wool products, but I had to take a picture of the Nikes. Obviously somebody's worn them. They belong to somebody that's worn them. But this is Harris Tweed, which is Scottish. Harris Tweed, I mean, look them up. I'm trying to think of like what's a likewise relevant sort of metaphor for Harris Tweed. I mean, it's just like fancy tweed fabric. The Scottish um the plaids, like that's Harris Tweed. They've been around for a long time. And they are one of those companies that has like the royal seal, like they're allowed to do their work under the royal seal because the royalty gets stuff from them, like Harris Tweed jackets and things like that. So anyway, I thought that was really neat that they made this pair of Nikes with Harris Tweed. Oops. Oh, okay. And this was a fun display. And here's something that's different than a quilt show. With the exception of things that were made and submitted by, makers to be judged and juried, you could touch everything. and they had signs that said, please touch. Now, the stuff that's on the wall behind this display, those are things that people submitted, and they had a sign that asked you not to touch those things. But this stuff, you could touch it. It had all of these, like, nice little definitions of what each type of fabric was. Um, there was like a chart and stuff. I just thought it was really cool. So I just snapped a picture of it. And I think that's the last one. So yeah, that was my short and sweet trip. um, but I gotta say, like, I mean, just in general, the sheep are delightful. People are so nice, knitters and spinners. They are, much like quilters. They're very passionate about what they make, and love to talk about it, love to show you stuff. Um, so yeah. Oh, one other thing I gotta show you. So this is a product that my friend bought. Let's see. Let me move. I'm gonna move myself a little bit so you can see the whole thing. So this is called a boom loom. And I guess if you do this kind of work, you might have heard of this before. I had not heard of this, but it's a little tabletop loom. It the the loom itself is under here. It's sort of just a metal thing with these little, the little metal prongs that come up. It reminds me of one of those pot holder makers almost. The kind you stretch the loops on in wee pot holders. Kind of reminded me of that a little bit, but it's got this pattern maker that slips in there, and you turn this thing around and it makes your shed for you. So I think she at this time has 4 different pattern dials or bars. And I don't know, I don't think they're 3D printed. I think that they're manufactured, like factory manufactured, but they look like the kind of thing, like, my guess is she probably did do 3D printing, as like a test, to test out her designs. But it is really fascinating to me that this technology. So this is the sort of thing that somebody who's new to weaving could pick this up and start weaving immediately a 2x2 twill without having to learn what a weaving draft looks like, how to read it, how it operates. And they could weave this and then sort of reverse engineer it to learn about what they have woven. Or if you're an experienced weaver, you could use this to do like swatching, to try out a pattern. So I thought this was like, what an incredible tool. And apparently it has won, let's see, the 2025 Core 77 Design Award, whatever that is. Apparently she has sold this in, like, I don't know if it was at the Met, in some art, fancy art place. And I think it probably was like the Met. So this was just such a neat thing. So I just had to, like, talk about this. I want one. And like, the thing is, like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I quilt. I'm a quilter. I don't necessarily make, but I just thought, oh, I could weave 2x2 twill without thinking about it. Like, so I thought that was really neat. And literally just to play with this website, it's theboomloom.com. If you go to their pattern picker page, you can actually play with it and decide. So you can change the color of what you're weaving with, and you can change how big your warp and weft threads are, like this, see? And then you just start weaving, and it'll show you what your weaving will look like. So not only does she have this cool tool, but let's see, I think you can, yeah, it looks like you can change the stuff on the fly. And see, like, how, what your weave will look like. Isn't that cool? I love things like this, like interactive. I mean, this is the kind of thing, like, this is STEM. And if you don't know what STEM is, it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And when they add A in there, STEAM, it becomes science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And this to me is definitely a STEAM tool. This is something that children could pick up, and it's very simple, and they could start to understand, you know, this the properties of how this works. And as we know, weaving, the jacquard looms of olden days, are those punch cards are what led to modern computing. So here you go. When we look at STEAM, all of this so much older, and than what some of the technologies we have. So yes, absolutely quilters. I've noticed tabletop looms and weavings are definitely having a moment. I feel like weaving has maybe kind of been in my peripheral for a long time because I did go through this like knitting phase. And so I've always kind of, even though I'm not like a hardcore knitting person, I've kind of just sort of peripherally had my eye on knitting, and weaving is starting to like really, really infiltrate that space. So yeah, and there was all kinds of different little looms and doohickeys and gadgets and things that they had there for sure. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'll get myself a boom loom for my birthday or Christmas or something, and I'll have to do something quilty to make it, to dovetail it in with quilting. So, all right, really quick before I get to the main thing I was going to talk to you guys, I'm going to read something to you today. I wanted to quickly show you my Jonathan Adler stuff. So this is the diamond art kit I mentioned the other day. It is 3 bookmarks, and they look like they're going to be very pretty, but I don't know. They're thick. The bookmark itself is fairly, like, I don't know, a 32nd of an inch thick. It's kind of like a thick plexiglass and or acrylic or something. And then once you add the diamonds, I suspect these things are going to be kind of chunky, and I don't know that putting them in a book would be very worthwhile. But I was pretty impressed with everything that comes in this kit. I'm not a diamond art person, so I don't know what these kits usually look like. But back on Thursday, I think Betsy Dragonfly was here, and she said she does do diamond art, and she said she thought that this was expensive compared to like Michael's branded stuff. And I understand what she means now, because now once I've looked at what comes with it, this is like $16 for these 3. Um, and like they're like this big. So 3 of them, like that's not a whole lot of surface area, for $16. So I get the point. But, for me, I knew that there's no way I could do a whole, diamond art, painting scene, canvas, whatever you'd call it. So I thought this will be my inclusion into the world. I think I mentioned the baboon, and then this is the other one. It's a wall hanging embroidery. So it's a bead embroidery kit to make this this wall hanging. I think the intent is that you finish it off inside this hoop, which I don't find very charming. A lot of embroideries, they show how a nice way to finish them off as a wall hanging is to just finish it off inside of an embroidery hoop. And it's really cute if the embroidery hoop, you have one that's like painted a color, or, just like an old fashioned, wooden embroidery hoop. But I don't, there's something not very charming about the plastic. So I don't know about that, but we'll see. I'm committed to making all of these. And look what I did this weekend, you guys. Probably Friday night I did most of this. I got one side of the eyeglasses case done. And I think it turned out pretty good. I mean, it's loopy the way it's supposed to be. The back even looks good. I'm not sure if this is what you're supposed to do, but I did have some like and I don't know if it had to do with my tension or the tension of the fabric or whatever, but sometimes the loop on the front would be really long. And I was like, what if those are gonna kind of, you know, rezhuzh themselves, and they weren't. So once I was done, I took some scissors that kind of laid them parallel and just sort of sheared some of that off. I think it's probably okay because the tension of the fabric holds the loops in, and it would hold those pieces in that are not loops anymore. They're just, you know, it's sort of like with embroidery. If you know how to do a turkey stitch in embroidery, it will look very much like this. And you can trim turkey stitch. You can cut the loops in turkey stitch and kind of brush them to make it furry. And so I kind of, using that same thought process, I think it'll be okay. So I think I might put a little bit of fabric glue on the back of this before I finish it off. So anyway, I just have the other side to do, and then I get to put it together. So I'm very excited. I'm bought in. I'm very much bought into the punch needle. I think it was much easier than I expected it to be for this. And even though these are kind of medium level tools and stuff, they're not the finest tools. They're still good enough. I mean, they I think that the punch needle itself, it's tiny, and it kind of made my hand cramp a little bit. If I was gonna make more, I would want some better handle for this, but I think it's turned out okay. I'm pleasantly surprised. So, all right, let's get to what I was going to read you guys. I've rambled a lot and taken up a lot of time. So, what I wanted to look at today is sticking with kits. I saw tons of kits at the Sheep and Wool Festival, and they were all very interesting to me. Is it, like I said, I'm always looking at that, like, what is included in the kit? Like, is everything you need to be successful in there? And, quilt kits, same thing. When we look at what each company did, from early times, I've talked about the Marie Webster kits were very, very interesting as far as, what was in there for you to figure out how to make your quilt. And then, of course, I've mentioned this book before. This is Rosemary Warner's book. She has a whole database if you are interested in what she does. And I have, I was going to put the link for her site in here so that if you want to go look at her things, you can. Because I love this book. It's a very good book. Okay. Man. Oops. No, that's not the right. Heh. All right, bear with me, guys. Just when you think things are going to work out. Okay. So there's it's the Quilt Kit ID website. She has like a database that you can become a member of. I'm not a member of that. I just have her book. But very good book if you're interested in reading about kit quilts, researching them, learning about them. It's a really good book, a reference book. So what I'm going to be reading is from Uncoverings. It is an earlier issue. It is the 1994 issue, so volume 15 of the American Quilt Study Group Uncoverings, which is the academic journal. And I am putting a link directly to it in here. So if you wanted to download this issue, you can. And so that's why I'll ask forgiveness later and not permission now to read this live. It is available. It is available for free. So, all right. So this article or paper was written in 1990, probably written in 93 for the 94 publication of this journal. And this one is entitled Kit Quilts in Perspective. The writers are Ann Copeland and Beverly Donovan. And the abstract is as follows. Despite a number of negative images imposed upon kit quilts, they have played an important role in quilt history. Quilters have used kits to further their quilting skills and design knowledge, using designs sometimes copied from museum artifacts, private collections, and winners of national quilting contests. Documented examples illustrate that kit quilts have never lost their appeal to quilt makers and quilt viewers. Kits have continued in popularity independent of the changes and trends that have occurred in 20th century quilt making. Kits have also been important. Quilts have also been an important segment of the quilt making industry. Quilt entrepreneurs have used their quilt making and quilt designing skills to make their products from the cottage to the factory. The quilt kit industry has provided economically viable employment opportunities for many people, a movement that has been only partially documented. Introduction. This study examines some of the prevailing 20th century attitudes about kit quilts. Although a number of negative images have been imposed upon kit quilts, kits seem to have played a more instrumental role in the entire quilt revival and the continued interest in quilt making than has been previously recognized. And we know that, there's I'm sure they'll talk about this, but, early 20th century is when these kits come about. Throughout this century, kits have never lost their popularity. They have contributed significantly to the quilting industry, and they have been a valid medium for continuing artistry and design in quilt making. Numerous people think of the commercial quilt kit as a fairly recent innovation, dating from the past 2 or 3 decades. Remember, this was written in 93, 94. Recent research, however, has provided evidence that quilt kits, in some form or another, have been in existence since the turn of the century. The earlier quilt kits differed considerably from the kits of today. These kits were not pre-stamped. Rather, they consisted of a background cloth, a perforated paper pattern, and stamping paste or stamping powder. During the 1920s and 30s, what most people have come to accept as a quilt kit, a sheet of cotton fabric stamped with applique placement marks and quilting lines, came into widespread use. The colored fabrics in the kit were stamped so that the quilt maker could cut out the patches and applique them to the matching location on the sheet. Another type of kit came with die-cut fabric pieces that were either appliqued onto a foundation or pieced to make a patchwork quilt. These pre-cut pieces were often hard to recognize in a finished quilt. When one sees a large assortment of fabrics in a quilt, or nicely color-coordinated quilt, one can always suspect a kit. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think particularly today, where, certainly there's lots of companies and like independent, just independents that do kits. I think with the way that fabric designers release their lines and their colorways, I can see somebody going in and buying, a particular colorway and making a quilt today, and it being like very kit-like, but that it's not really a kit. So I can see where things have changed from 94 to now. Embroidered kit quilts with their cross-stitched X's have been another popular type of kit. A fifth type of quilt kit, which is seldom seen, is the trapunto-style whole cloth quilt kit. Some of these kits were marked with chalk, had wool battings, and came with cotton sateen for the tops. I've never seen one of those. I would love to see that. I think that'd be interesting. And actually, I think that's no, this isn't a whole cloth, but pretty close on the front of Rosemary Werner's book. It's got applique on it, but it's very Spartan applique and lots of very dense quilting. Kit quilts have been described by some as paint-by-number quilts, while others have likened them to boxed cake mixes and instant foods. That's interesting for these to have come about at a time when those things were coming about, early 20th century. Carrie Hall lamented the proliferation of kit quilts in 1936, stating, "In the ready-cut quilts offered for sale and are seen the effects of this hurrying age in which we live." And she was right. Ethel Beam, in a 1956 issue of House Beautiful, wrote about one woman's experience with a quilt kit she had purchased while recovering from an illness in 1956. "I bought one of those packaged quilts, pre-cut, pre-stamped, complete with threads, and the like. It seemed like a suitable occupation for a convalescent, needing no thought and only a witless putting in of stitches. I soon quit the project in disgust because it was so ugly and without taste." The kit quilt, according to her, represented a loss in the art of quilting. Penny McMorris and Michael Kyle, contemporary art historians, commented on the uncreative aspects of quilt kits. Quilt making was dying, however, for another reason. During the Depression, the quilting industry had turned this innovative medium into a boring, mindless pastime. Professional designers made the creative decisions, leaving women with only the work of sewing the preordained quilts together. Companies printed patterns which determined size. Then patterns were printed in color to, as Grandma Dexter put it, assist the quilt maker in developing attractive color schemes. It was not long before manufacturers were not only selecting designs and colors, but cutting out the pieces and packaging the whole into kits they christened ready-cut quilts. Thomas K. Woodard in Blanche Greenstein, New York Quilt Dealers, speaking of 20th century kit quilts, noted the following: "All too often, the resulting quilt lacks individual style and imaginative spark. Mail-order specialty store patterns are sometimes stamped in muslin, with even simple quilting stitches indicated and packaged in kits. One such offering in 1916, the Sunbonnet Kitties crib quilt, included pieces stamped for cutting and embroidering, with the kitties dressed in outfits of pink, blue, yellow, purple, and heliotrope." What color is heliotrope? I think that's also pink. "With matching parasols. All aesthetic decisions were taken care of by the accompanying instructions, leaving no room whatsoever for the imagination." Although a number of negative images have been imposed upon kit quilts, a significant number of 20th century quilt makers have found kits a valid medium for expressing artistry and design in quilt making. The continued popularity of kit quilts. Ooh, here's some names you're going to recognize. In April 1993, Dorothy May and Harold Groves of Kansas City, Missouri, two prominent dealers of antique quilts and kit quilts, sponsored a major quilt show called Floral Patterns on Parade. Now, if you remember, Dorothy May and Harold were also the ones who did all of the books on the Sunbonnet family and did not make anybody give them any attributions for those patterns. So they have books and books and books of really great Sunbonnet Sue patterns, and we don't know where they originated from. Heliotrope. Okay, so heliotrope is a vibrant pinkish purple color named after the fragrant heliotropium flower, blending lavender with magenta to create a bright, whimsical tone. Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was a like a pinky color, pinky purple. It's interesting that they throw that in there. So Dorothy May and Harold, held at Kentucky Oaks Mall, Paducah, Kentucky, the show consisted primarily of quilts made from kits. The exhibit featured 4 kit quilts designed by Marie Webster, along with quilts made from kits once offered by Busilla, Hirschner's, Ladies Art Company, Lee Ward's, Paragon, and the Rainbow Company. The large audience attending this show expressed high regard for the quilts on display. Even contemporary quilt makers admired their designs and craftsmanship. The popularity of the kit quilts is also evidenced in Woodard and Greenstein's book, 20th Century Quilts, 1900 to 1950. 23, or about 14%, of the quilts and quilted items. Oh, crud. Sorry about that. My thumb hit the thing. So 23% of the quilts and quilted items featured in the book documenting this century's work, and so this century meaning the 20th century, this century's work are made from kits. Most of these were identified as such by the authors of the book. That's where you can kind of get into some trouble, unless they can point to the kit itself. If they're just saying, this is a kit quilt, you have to be careful. The presence of these quilts is not surprising when one considers the large number of kit quilts that were available during this time period, and quilt makers' lack of prejudice against them. Kits represented 20th century technology during a time in our culture when the assembly line was popular and there was little prejudice against repetitiveness. As further evidence of the continuing appeal of kit quilts, the authors have observed that quilt makers are reproducing quilt designs that were once available as kits. The book Great American Quilts, for example, features a pattern and directions for the quilt Trees and Garlands by Nancy Smith that was first produced as a kit quilt in the 1930s. Questa Benberry, I should remember her name, eminent quilt historian and kit quilt authority, spoke at the Quilters Hall of Fame induction luncheon held in Marion, Indiana on July 17, 1993. She talked about the popularity of kit quilts and pointed out that they had never really died out. Questa related the following account. I remember in the late 1950s traveling to a county fair in southern Illinois where there were at least 40 or 50 quilts entered in the competition, but only 3, I counted them, were made from scratch quilts. The rest were kits, embroidered or applique designs, or combined embroidered and applique patterns. This was not an unusual happenstance for that time, as I also visited large state fairs such as the Missouri State Fair, Illinois State Fair, Ohio State Fair, Iowa State Fair, and many smaller county fairs in various states. And frequently, the grand prize was awarded to a quilt made from a kit. My point is to state that kit quilts continued to be made from the 1940s to the 1970s. And she would know. Questa, she had a pretty big collection of quilt kits. And you can actually look through all of that. It's on the Quilt Index. I won't take the time to tell you how to get there, but if you want to know, let me know. But I have actually used her database, her collection, to find out things about my kit quilts. Or quilt kits. I have more quilt kits than I have kit quilts, although I have several kit quilts. Proof of Questa's thesis is readily seen in the numerous catalogs that offered kits for sale during the period from the 1940s to the 1970s, an era which has traditionally been viewed as a time when quilt making was largely on the wane. For instance, McCall's Needlework and Crafts Spring to Summer 1964 issue contained a full-page advertisement featuring Bucilla kits and other products. In 1978, an issue of Quilter's newsletter focused on the concern of a number of readers who had been having difficulty removing the stamp marks on their completed kit quilts. Bucilla and Rainbow Quilt Company offered instructions on various ways to remove the marks. Editor Bonnie Lehman added a note requesting readers to add to the information given. As late as 1982, the Stearns Technical Textiles Company, in its Mountain Mist catalog, still offered pre-cut quilt kits. Today, die-cut, appliqued, and pieced quilt kits are available from well-known companies such as Hearthside Quilts in Shelburne, Vermont, and Hirschner's Incorporated in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I don't know. Is Hirschner still around? I don't know. And I don't know if Hearthside Quilts is either. I mean, this is 1994. Oops. I did a bad thing to my keyboard. Um, so I don't know, if these are still available. A number of smaller companies and cottage industries, such as Advantage Graphic Designs, Busy Bee, and Calico Cupboard, also offer cut and ready cut quilt kits. Early quilt kit designers. Woodward and Greenstein believed that one of the one of the most misunderstood aspects of the 20th century quilt revival is the significant role played by commercial enterprises that published catalogs, patterns, and kits. The importance of these enterprises and their influence on the quilting revival has been largely overlooked and unexamined. By 1898, the Ladies' Art Company offered blocks and finished items. A person could order pre-sewn quilt blocks for 35 cents to $1.50, while the price for a complete quilt ranged from $25 to $45, depending on the complexity of the pattern. By 1922, the firm offered stamped kits for $5. At that time, the company, which had begun as a family operation with the children helping when they came home from school, employed 50 or more people designing patterns, stamping cloth for kits, and producing instruction pamphlets on a wide range of needle arts. A lesser known but significant influence on the early quilting industry was the Wilkinson Quilt Company of Ligonier. It looks like Legionnaire, but it's spelled Ligon. So Ligonier, Indiana, I'm guessing, which began as a cottage industry in 1908. 1908! From the home of two sisters, Ona and Rosalie Wilkinson. The Wilkinson Quilt Company grew steadily, moved into a factory, and was incorporated in February of 1914. So this is predating, 1914, that's just predating, or just overlapping with Marie Webster's patterns or kits. The sisters referred to their quilts as Wilkinson art quilts and sold them by mail order through specialty shops. Oh, Hirschner's does still exist. Awesome. Thanks, Druid. I'll have to look at that later. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've run across Hirschner's for anything except for in kid quilt discussion. So, um, so the sisters referred to their quilts as Wilkinson art quilts and sold them by mail order through specialty shops and at various summer and winter resorts, as well as through special representatives. That's interesting, through resorts, because I can see, somebody who likes to do needlework being inspired by something that, like a kit that might have, I guess even if it's like a very slim relationship with the resort itself, I could see how somebody would, might be interested in something like that. The Wilkinson Quilt Company created quilts and other quilted products of a very high quality. By 1927, the company employed 100 employees who made hand-quilted trapunto-style wool blankets, robes, and colonial-style applique quilts, as well as whole-cloth quilt kits. Okay, so this is probably why I've never seen these, is because they're very old and rare. Today, one of the fine sateen whole-cloth trapunto-style quilts hangs in the library of Ligonier, Indiana, as a visual testimony to the high quality of the kits produced. Marie Webster founded another influential kit quilt company, the Practical Patchwork Company, in 1921. Okay, so she did. Okay, I'm thinking of her book. Her book was like 1915, 1916. So it wasn't for a few years until she founded her company. So the Practical Patchwork Company in 1921, with the help of two close friends, Ida Hess and Evangeline Bayshore, the company marketed both kits and finished quilts using Marie Webster's designs. It sold kits and patterns all across the country and even overseas by mail order and through department stores like Chicago's Marshall Field's, as well as in specialty outlets like Mary McElwain's famous quilt shop in Wisconsin. I would love to have seen that, gone to Mary McElwain's. It also sold its products in stores such as the Lewis Levy Appliance Company in Ligonier, Indiana. Here, Ruth Levy had a corner in the store where she sold Marie Webster kits along with embroidered goods and notions. Man, I wish I could go to an appliance store now and like have something more interesting to look at than appliances. um, there's an appliance place right near my house. They don't sell anything good except for washers and dryers and such. Many of Marie Webster's designs were also sold as completed quilts. She had these quilted by residents of the Emily Flynn Memorial Home in Marion. So I guess she's got these old ladies that are at a nursing home. I would not have guessed that. During the Great Quilt Revival of the 1920s and 30s, the Flynn home could not keep up with the burgeoning demand for quilts. Practical Patchwork began using the services of fundraising church groups in Kentucky, Michigan, Kansas, and various parts of Indiana, from Van Buren to Nashville. Present evidence supports the idea that the Kentucky quilting group was most likely the Eleanor Beard Incorporated cottage industry. A number of national advertisements by Eleanor Beard in sources such as House Beautiful magazine and Needlecraft, the Home Arts magazine, stated specifically that Eleanor sold Marie Webster quilts, and some of the ads were illustrated with Webster quilts. Eleanor Beard is like a whole nother thing. Like, she sold all kinds of interesting things. There's an Eleanor Beard elephant pincushion that I have seen a number of times being auctioned, and they're like worth a lot of money. Or at least they sell for a lot of money. So keep your eyes peeled for Eleanor Beard stuff. It is clear that the Practical Patchwork Company made a significant contribution during the 1920s and 30s to the economy in parts of the United States that were otherwise economically strapped. Mary McIlwain, who lived in Walworth, Wisconsin, decided to operate a quilt cottage industry as a component of a full-scale quilt service organization. In her Mary McIlwain quilt shop, she carried completed quilts and comforters, a large inventory of paper patterns, cotton and wool batting, waxed thread, needles, quilter's notions, percale sheets, pillowcases, and fabrics. McIlwain hired a number of women to complete the appliqued and pieced quilts and to prepare some applique quilts by basting them only. Where did we see that sort of thing happen? Perhaps with Baltimore Album Quilts here in Baltimore? Maybe. Well, there goes the police. The women also stamped the cloth, cut out the patches, and sent out others in kit form. In 1939, Mary McIlwain published Romance of the Village Quilts, a 35-page, and this actually exists in Dr. Dunton's collection. I've seen this. A 35-page booklet containing her philosophy, some history, and a description of her products. She later used this booklet as a catalog, offering her customers patterns as well as quilt kits. Some of McIlwain's kits were designed by Marie Webster, while other designs in the book are purportedly those of Mary herself. Her customers came from surrounding towns, including Chicago, which was 80 miles away, to visit her shop. In 1933, she served as one of the judges for the Sears Century of Progress quilt contest at the Chicago World's Fair, chosen because of the respect given her by customers, workers, and vendors. Another topic we know lots about. The entrepreneuring women who produced and sold kits were not stereotyped housewives trying to earn money. They were, as often as not, well-educated, and a number of them artists and writers. Mrs. Scioto Danner, a prime example, taught school before she became involved in the business of producing and selling quilt kits. Following a period of ill health and a failed marriage, oh my, she had made a double wedding ring quilt that her mother sold for $25. And later, she made a double tulip design that sold for $45, the only quilt she was ever to make completely by herself. Mrs. Danner remembered how she switched to making kits. The following year, March 1930, I had a display at Innes store in Wichita, or Inns, it's Innes, so I assume that's Innes, in Wichita. I was selling only finished quilts. So many people asked me for my designs that I took orders and came home and cut patterns by hand for those who wanted them so badly. In 1934, she published her first catalog, which included 5 kits. Then, in 1936, ill health forced her away from her business until 1958, when she published book 3 of her catalog and began filling orders again. During those years, Mrs. Danner operated an extensive cottage industry, filling orders for tops, kits, and finished quilts. And if you look up Mrs. Danner on eBay, you can find her booklets, both originals, which are more expensive, obviously, and then like reprints of them. I think they're available for a really long time. Almost all of the quit. Do you know how hard it is to keep saying kit quilt and quilt kit all over and over? Almost all of the quilt kit designers had their own characteristic styles that eventually became associated with their names. Anne Orr was one such quilt artist. Now remember, Anne Orr is the one with all the teeny little blocks that make kind of 8-bit pixel pictures. Quilt designs based on the concept of cross-stitch work became one of her trademarks, although in reality, they only represented 15% of her total quilt designs. Anne Orr offered her first stamped cloth kit for a poppy quilt with a matching bedside rug in January 1932. It sold for $1.50. Now that's interesting. I wonder what this looked like, because I know in Dr. Dunton's collection, his daughter made him a poppy quilt, and it was in 1930 something. I can't remember if it was 33 or 35. So it could have been Anne Orr's pattern. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research to see. The stamping of the cloth eliminated the need to trace the flower and stem pattern pieces. More importantly, the stamping eliminated the problem of finding fabric to produce the proposed color gradations. Throughout the years, Orr's prices varied according to the size and style of the quilt, but never rose above $9 for a kit of stamped and ready-to-cut fabric. An unknown number of Orr's quilt kits were sold through Good Housekeeping. 3 of her quilt kits were featured in 3 different issues of House Beautiful: Autumn Leaf, French Wreath, and Forget-Me-Not. Her autumn leaf design consisted of multitudes of leaves formed from various scraps with a delicate meandering stem or vine. The autumn leaf design found its way into the Sears Century of Progress in Quilt Making booklet in 1934. Orr's success as a designer was unmatched. On one single day in 1917, it is said that she received 500,000 requests for her own brochure. Anne Orr was described in a feature story in the Nashville Banner as a pathfinder in the field of professional opportunities in practical art. While serving as the art needlework editor of Good Housekeeping, she still found time to manage the Anne Orr Studio of Nashville, which employed at least 100 women for many years. 100 women, that's amazing. During this time, she also authored more than 70 books and pamphlets, many of which were translated into French and Spanish. Mary Kay Waldvogel, quilt historian, states, her impact on quilt making through her writing and judging of contests was certainly significant, but as a successful businesswoman at a time when it was not common for women to do such things, she was a pioneer. Ruby Short McKim was another important person associated with quilt kits and quilt patterns. A designer and illustrator schooled at Parsons School of Art, she turned to designing quilt patterns for the Kansas City Star and for Better Homes and Gardens magazine, of which she was the art needlework editor. In 1931, Ruby and her husband Arthur, owners of McKim Studios, published 101 Patchwork Patterns, a book which continues to be regarded as a standard to this day. The McKim Studios also offered kits and designs through mail order catalogs called Designs Worth Doing. Ruby Short McKim is best known for her unusual Art Deco inspired patterns, though in fact, as was the case with Anne Orr, they represented only a small portion of her work. Rise of quilt kit companies. And by the way, I don't know if she's still on there, but Ruby Short McKim's granddaughter has had an Etsy site. I know that she had some health problems for a while, but I'd purchased some McKim reprint stuff through her site. So kind of cool that, still the family still has, Ruby Short McKim's designs and, work is still in their purview. Rise of the quilt kit companies. The rise of the larger quilt kit companies in the 1930s. Sorry. 'Tis allergy season, you guys. So the rise of the larger companies in the 1930s was largely due to the success of the earlier cottage industries, as well as to the interest generated by numerous county and state fairs and expositions that were taking place across the United States. The Sears Century of Progress Quilt Contest at the Chicago World's Fair in 1933, with its 25,000 entries, took place at the peak of the quilt revival, providing a considerable impetus for the quilt industry. Sears and other companies sold patterns and kits of the first 3 prize-winning quilts. Legacies from this fair are the many copies of the prize-winning quilts. The most widely copied quilt, both as a kit and pattern, seems to have been the Autumn Leaf, which was a regional winner. The rise of the larger quilt kit companies was helped by the efforts of popular women's magazines, which sold quilt kits, as well as offering them as premiums in the first half of the century. The July 1932 issue of Needlecraft, the Home Arts magazine, for example, carried an illustration of a star and diamond block and an ad offering sufficient blue and white stamped material to make 25 blocks as a premium for anyone getting 3 new subscriptions. In case you don't know, many of these women's needlework catalogs or needlework magazines, they would get readers to sell subscriptions to other people, and if their name was turned in on these, so many subscriptions, they could win prizes and things. Kind of like the stuff that kids always have to sell in school, like the band boosters. Do they still do that? Like, they're still selling things when my son was in school, but because I haven't worked in an office in a really long time, I don't know what other, if their kids are still selling that stuff. Aided in part by the media and in part by the growing demand for the kits, companies such as Aunt Ellen, Busilla, Franks, Gold Art, Hirschner's, Jack Dempsey, Lee Ward's, Marvel Art, Progress, Vogue Art, Wonder Art, and others continue to operate successfully. These companies, employing numerous people, created a clear and positive impact on the economy of the times. The kits offered by the companies through their own catalogs were also distributed through large mail-order houses such as Sears Roebuck and Company and Montgomery Ward's. They could also be found in the popular 5 and dime stores such as Ben Franklin's, McCrory's, and Woolworth's. The company's kits were offered for sale by smaller magazines such as Aunt Martha's Workbasket and by prestigious magazines such as Good Housekeeping and Ladies' Home Journal. Small retailers also kept some in stock. The rather low cost of the kits made it possible for people at all economic levels to obtain them, which in turn increased the demand for more kits. The commercial aspect of quilting, the fruits of which we are able to enjoy today, continued to grow and develop long before the revival of the 1970s. The quilt kit company's influence on quilt making has been significant. During an era of difficult economic times, this industry provided work for many families. In this way, livelihoods were provided while quilt making itself was being promoted. Judging by the number of kits that are still seen today, we can assume that a fairly extensive labor force was in existence. In addition, the kit companies also provided a creative outlet for women designers during a time when business opportunities for women were limited. A valid medium to learn quilt making skills and artistry. Throughout this century, quilt makers have used kits to further their quilt making skills and design knowledge. In the first half of the century, quilt kits provided a means for quilt makers to learn skills that otherwise may not have been available due to the lack of quilt guilds and quilting classes and the scarcity of well-written instructions. The quilt kits may also have influenced trends in color coordination by the choices of fabrics that designers and manufacturers provided. In a time when following a trend was considered more desirable than being individualistic. According to eminent quilt historian Joyce R. Gross, Dr. Jeanette Dean Throckmorton was one of the quilt makers who used kits, especially for her applique quilts. Jeanette graduated from the Keokuk Medical School in Iowa in 1907 and began quilting the same year. An example of her work, Blue Iris, can be seen in 20th Century Quilts, 1900 to 1950, by Woodard and Greenstein. The authors acknowledge that the skill required to execute quilts of this quality is of the highest level. Gross noted that Dr. Jeanette made many pieced quilts, but she became best known for her elaborate applique quilts with stuffed and corded work. Mary Schaefer, whose work has been brought to light by Gwen Marsden and Joe Cunningham, also developed her quilting skills through the use of quilt kits. Mary did a considerable amount of needleworking, knitting ties, tatting lace edgings for embroidered linens, and sewing clothing. While purchasing needleworking supplies at Smith Bridgman's department store in downtown Flint, Michigan, in the early 1940s, she first saw quilts displayed in the art and needlework department, where the completed quilts hanging on the walls advertised kits. In 1949, Mary purchased one of the kits. After reading the kit instructions, Mary was astounded by the amount of time and effort it would require. Thinking that she would never be able to do all the work required, she returned the kit. Other than seeing occasional references to quilt patterns in needlework magazines, the kit remained her only contact with quilts until 1952 when her son joined the United States Army. After her son left home, Mary found that despite her other needlework, she still had free time for other projects. She returned to Smith Bridgman's to purchase another quilt kit called Rhododendron, which was made by the Progress Company. As the first quilt she made, Rhododendron helped Mary define her idea of how to make quilts. Contrary to her fears, the work posed no special problems for her. The numbered applique pieces were pre-cut, and the quilting lines were marked with dots. Although she lacked a frame, Mary proved that she did not need one by basting together the 3 layers and quilting in her lap. The quilt, still in existence today, is elegant, symmetrical, and has an artful border. After finishing her rhododendron kit quilt in 6 months, she purchased another applique quilt kit, Poppy Wreath. With the completion of the second quilt, Mary considered quilting one of her domestic arts. And for you guys that hang out with me and Jill over on Quilt Nerding, it's probably been 2 years now, but we read the book about Mary Schaefer, which was written by Gwen Marsden, and I happen to own one of Mary Schaefer's quilts. It's just a small quilt. It's a Sunbonnet Babies, and it's embroidered, but Mary Schaefer's nonetheless. So, time after time, we have seen that kit quilts have served as design inspiration for quilt makers. For instance, in the 1930s, E. Buckner Kirk designed the quilt kit Elephant's Child based on Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. The kit appeared in women's magazines for $5. $5. You know how much some of these kits go for now? And I mean, contemporary kits too could cost hundreds of dollars, depending on, what it is. Gosh, what did we look at was it the block of the month of some of the Liberty quilt kits that I think Duckadilly has, and then I think did Fat Quarter Shop come out with something? Um, so yeah, there's these kits today that independent groups are putting together that, the price of the fabric really drives up the price of the kit. So $5. Quilt maker Minnie Bjork, I love that, Bjork, of Minnesota, could not afford to buy the kit, so she drew the pattern herself from the photograph in a magazine. She used plaids for her elephants and a cotton sateen for the background. She later entered the quilt in the Traverse County Fair in Wheaton, Minnesota, and won first place. Emma Mary Martha Andres, also known as Emma Andres, of Prescott, Arizona, was inspired by magazines and newspapers that brought the world to her in her small hometown, where she worked in her father's cigar store. While previous generations of quilters relied on more direct handing down of ideas and patterns from mother to daughter, 20th century quilters found a wealth of inspiration from periodicals such as Women's World. Miss Andres ordered a tiger lily quilt kit. Quilt kit. I'm struggling here, you guys. Tiger lily quilt kit from this publication in 1931. Thus began her love affair with quilting, which produced a number of outstanding pieces, including one which received a merit award in the 1933 Sears Quilt Contest. Millie Clegg also utilized a kit quilt as the inspiration for one of her quilts. Clegg was related through marriage to the company that owned the William E. Wright Company, a firm which pioneered the idea of seam bindings and tapes that came in packages rather than on a spool. You could still buy the Wright Company trims today. Her quilt, which is documented and illustrated in New Jersey Quilts 1977 to 1950, was redesigned by her sister Gladys from the original kit, which Millie did not like. If some quilt kits were redesigned by their makers, they represented a small percentage of the total quilt kits put together. Judging from the kit quilts in existence today, most makers of kit quilts executed them as they were presented by the manufacturer. The success of these designs may explain why some people think of quilt designs as mundane and nothing more than prettied up versions of familiar designs, such as those of the Pennsylvania Dutch. Occasionally, large needlework companies like Paragon and Busilla obtained prominent museums permissions to faithfully reproduce authentic antique Pennsylvania Dutch German quilts. The antique quilt collection of distinguished preservationist Florence Peto, y'all know Florence, provided the source of designs for several quilt kits. Applique and cross-stitch quilt kits advertised as Pennsylvania Dutch quilt adaptations included Provincial, Remembrance, Memory, and Flowering Hearts by Paragon and American Calico by Busilla. One of Paragon's most successful quilt kits, which I own a finished version and the kit itself, called American Glory, copied a circa 1850 Pennsylvania German summer quilt in the Titus Giese collection at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The museum obtained the original quilt in 1955, and Paragon's kit first appeared in a 1961 article in Good Housekeeping magazine. Needlework and department stores prominently displayed a made-up block of the center eagle. The American Glory kit gained a kind of credence not usually accorded a quilt kit when photographs of it appeared as editorial illustrations instead of advertisements in magazines and books. Although traditionally the life of a particular quilt kit was no more than a dozen years, American Glory survived partly because of the new interest fueled by its patriotic motif at the time of the nation's bicentennial celebration. So that kit itself was made from 1961 all the way through the end of the 70s. I think I want to say the version I have is like from 76 or 77. The fabrics in it changed a little bit, but it was essentially the same pattern for a very long time, more than 15 years. The Pennsylvania German style quilts were not the only designs. Oh, and by the way, that particular quilt, American Beauty, is the quilt that, oh gosh, I'm blanking on which book it was. It was Bob Bishop and Carter Halk's book. I'm blanking on which one it was. Or no, or was it Bob Bishop? It's one of the well-known writers and historians and collectors. And they were fooled by a version. They, I guess, didn't do their research on the quilt itself. Didn't realize that the original was in the Philadelphia Museum. And we're told by some other collectors that this quilt was from 1860 something. When in fact, what they had a picture of was the Paragon version of this quilt kit. American Glory. And it is published in the book, but I think it was Questa Benberry that figured out that they did not, in fact, have an old quilt, but rather they had a fairly contemporary quilt that was made from a kit. So when you feel bad about misunderstanding a quilt when you see it, or misrepresenting it, just know that people much better than us have done the same thing. The Pennsylvania German style quilts were not the only designs reproduced. Other highly respected quilts housed in museum collections also served as a source of inspiration for a number of quilt kit designs. Paragon's The Cherry Tree is a replica of the original in the Art Institute of Chicago, while the original of the Friendship quilt rests in the Shelburne Museum. Bucilla's Liberty design, reissued in anticipation of the 1976 bicentennial celebration, is a replica of a quilt in the Smithsonian Institution. And that one, Liberty, I believe that one is an eagle. Is also an eagle. I have that one as well. The kit and the quilt itself. Knowledgeable private collectors also provided sources of design inspiration for kit quilts. Florence Pito's collection yielded an antique wig rose first offered in replica by American Home Magazine in 1947, and later as a cross-stitch quilt kit by Paragon. An album quilt from Pito's collection also appeared as a cross-stitch Baltimore Bride quilt by Paragon. So it's a Baltimore album quilt that they translated, I think, into cross-stitch. Paragon's Calico Sunflower, Rose of Sharon, and May Basket kits were derived from the same source. Since as early as the first quarter of the century, quilt kits designed specifically for children have had wide appeal. The themes include nursery tales, animals, and circuses, as well as Sunbonnet Sue and Overall Sam. Other designs have been influenced by play equipment, toys, children's books, cartoon characters such as Mickey Mouse and Casper the Friendly Ghost, as well as a Western theme. Quilt kits designed with the baby or child in mind can be pieced, appliqued, or embroidered. And there's also the cross-stitch ones. We see continued evidence of this popularity in the number of these kits featured in quilt books and magazines, as well as at quilt shows that we visit. Conclusion. The role and importance of the quilt kit industry has been largely overlooked and misunderstood. While quilt kits have long been described as mere paint-by-numbers projects that leave little room for creativity, this study concludes that the quilt kit played a more significant role than has been previously recognized. Kit quilts have enjoyed a continuing popularity independent of the changes and trends that have occurred in 20th century quilt making. We have observed this through quilt shows exhibiting these quilts and through the numbers of such quilts published in magazines and books and advertised in current catalogs. The quilt kit gave rise to an industry that offered women an opportunity to become entrepreneurs and be recognized for their creative efforts. The industry provided economically viable employment opportunities for many people, from quilt designers to assembly workers, a movement that has been only partially documented. With regard to continuing the artistry and design in quilt making, the kit quilt provided quilt makers with an education that was often unavailable elsewhere. Kits provided quilt makers with the means to develop skills in various aspects of quilt making in areas or locations lacking guilds, workshops, and well written instructions. Some of the kit designs were copied from works in museums and private collections, enabling people far from the sources to see such masterpieces for the first time. Quilt makers were also tempted to begin quilt making by the ease of making a beautiful and color coordinated quilt. Often, people who first made the kits went on to make other quilts, and a number of those quilts won awards. The kit quilt stands today as a visual reminder of an interesting facet of quilt making. It deserves recognition and further research. And then her notes, I look through her notes quickly, and with the exception, I think, of like one or two books here, I've got them all. So I was like, yee. She does mention a couple of things though that I will never have access to, which one is a talk that Questa Benberry gave at a Quilters Hall of Fame luncheon. So that's a bummer. But yeah, a lot of these are wonderful resources that I either want to circle back to or that that I have on my bookshelf. So I think that, I mean, this idea of kits, I keep going back to the fact that, as, Copeland and, oh gosh, I don't remember her last name now. It's Ann Copeland and, bear with me a second. Let me get to the top of this article. It's Ann Copeland and Beverly Dunavant that wrote that article or that paper. And so as they said, this idea of people who, maybe have other hobbies, similar hobbies, and pick up a kit, a kit to make a quilt, it might start a quilt making, hobby, or, people may want to continue making quilts after having experience with the kit. But, and in the same way, I'm looking at these Jonathan Adler kits, and like the punch needle one, I'm thinking like, all right, I can do this. I don't know that the crochet ones are gonna entice me so much, or the needlepoint one, but nonetheless, I think they are kind of a low stakes way, I guess, of getting, having all the materials together and kind of deciding whether you like this thing and do I want to pursue it again? Do I want to make another one? Do I want to go out and buy, the materials and maybe the next step up in quality of the tools? Or was that one time enough for me? Like I can see, perhaps the bead embroidery one is not going to be something I'm going to keep doing. I kind of suspect that I will not do diamond art painting much, but it's something to try. And it's, again, it's like this low stakes way. And, the other thing I think that maybe doesn't get spoken about as much. So, and I'll kind of start off with the metaphor here. We see people, dressed in garments that we like. You see somebody wearing an outfit and you think, wow, I love that outfit. Where'd you get it? And, they bought it at so-and-so store, or they ordered it from blah, blah, blah catalog. You want that for yourself because you just like the way it looks, and you know that it would be fun to wear. It might look good on your body. It might be like your colors. And I don't think that anybody is going to accuse you of being, Well, I mean, I guess people could accuse you of being unoriginal if you copied somebody, in their wardrobe. But just by buying the same outfit somebody else is wearing doesn't make you a copycat. It just makes you, a person who likes that garment, and particularly if it's a particular print. Um, I think about like Lily Pulitzer, if you know those dresses, in other. Lily Pulitzer makes other stuff, but it's the dresses, the A-line. It's like sleeveless little A-line dresses, and they're in all of these different. They're like kind of Puccini sort of prints, very popular. Um, and it's a trend. It's something that people want to have. I don't see that as any different when you pick, say, a kit made by a famous person or by a famous designer, because you want to have a piece of what they make. It's not necessarily just about, I don't know how to make a quilt, so I'm going to buy this kit to figure out how to do it. I mean, that's a piece of it, but also, like, I think people will often buy kits made by designers or by companies today because they want a piece of that. Um, and there's maybe no other way to get that famous company or famous designer, without buying that kit. Like I wouldn't be able to afford to buy a quilt made by so and so person, but if there was a kit out there, I could buy that kit and make something similar and have, so I think that often is maybe some of the mindset behind these, sort of prepackaged opportunities. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's unimaginative. I don't think it is a shortcut, certainly, but it's the shortcut that I think is totally okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. So, and if an artist or a designer just has something that you really like and they're offering it up, as a pattern or a kit, then, why not buy it and make it if it brings you joy? So, um, I've always, you know, I've always felt this way about kits. Like there's nothing wrong with it. And it doesn't make you any less creative or any less, creative, than to do it. Because the thing is, I mean, like you can do it well. I mean, I would say that, in terms of taking a quilt kit, I, would probably not change anything about it if I was going to make it as is. I wouldn't substitute different fabrics. I would just use what comes with the kit. And, hey, Marianne. Oh, I forgot I was wearing my Poison Green shirt. um, I generally with kits would make things as is, unless there was really, really something about it I just didn't like. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine. I think it's okay because it's really in, my execution. And that paper mentioned a number of people who created stuff, and it was from a kit, but their execution was so good. Their stitches are so tiny, and their needle turn embroidery is so good. So I think that there's ways of sort of transcending that, like, oh, you didn't work as hard, right? Yes, you can work just as hard with a kit that was handed, everything was already pre-chosen for you, but you're putting your skills out there in a different part of the making than in choice of design and color, fabric / whatever. So, all right. On Thursday, we'll get into some more kits. So let's read a little bit. We've got a few minutes to read a little bit of Patchwork by Averil Colby. So let me pull up. We got pictures. I did not give you guys any good pictures for the Uncoverings article, but I can give you one for this. So we have gotten through the first couple of chapters. Marianne, you crack me up. Marianne says, I use quilt kits to extend my lifespan. Here's hoping it works. Well, you know, if collecting kits extends a lifespan, I'm well on my way to outliving everybody. All right. So we are now on chapter 3, and we're starting to get pictures. So let me skip ahead. And this will be, I think, our first pictures. So as a reminder, we are reading Patchwork by Averil C, published in 1958. And she was an English quilter, writer, author, etc. So chapter 3, Tools and Equipment. The usual contents of a workbox: needles, thread, pins, scissors, and thimble, together with selected pieces of otherwise unwanted materials and templates for shaping the patches, are all that is needed for patchwork. Indeed. Indeed. Templates. In early patchwork, the shapes were made without templates. Materials were folded and cut by the thread, but with the introduction of more ambitious shapes than squares or rectangles, such as 6 or 8-sided pieces, it is not unlikely that this led to the need for a basic pattern. I think even with a square or rectangle, it's nice to have a pattern, because the pattern, particularly when it's a rigid form, gives you nice, clean corners. Because I cannot cut a perfect square out of fabric to save my life, nor could I draw a perfect square, So having something that is perfectly squared up is, even if you're just doing squares, nice to have. Quilting patterns relied on templates for ensuring the accurate repetition of an outline, and the idea of using them for patchwork may well have come from the traditional quilters. It is very necessary that patchwork templates are made of a hard substance that is resistant to scissor cutting, if they are not to lose their shape. 19th century templates were cut from oak, tin, and card. Others have been made from zinc, pewter, silver. Silver? A quilt pattern made from silver. Yowza. Brass and copper, and 1 or 2 of bone and ivory have been found in old workboxes. Metals such as zinc and aluminum should be treated with caution, as templates made of both are likely to shave off at the edges with use. Stiff card is good for temporary use, but it too will become inaccurate with hard use. And she said hard usage includes lending. You know what? You lend it to other people, you are not going to get it back in the same condition it went out. Many old templates were homemade by the men of the household. They were always well and accurately cut, and for present-day cutting at home, instructions are given in the appendix. It is now possible to buy commercially produced plastic templates, and also some in thin perspex, which I think is an earlier, like, plexiglass or acrylic, which can also be cut at home, but no substance is as good wearing as brass or copper. Until the late 1920s, templates had been used only for the basic shapes from which the paper patterns, from which the paper patterns had been cut. A second template, used as a guide for cutting materials with accuracy also, was introduced into work done by Much Haddam Women's Institute with the help of Miss Muriel Rose. This meant that templates were used in pairs, with the one for cutting materials approximately 1/4 of an inch larger on each side than the basic shape. It will be seen from the diagrams, and this is what we're looking at here, that the large templates are shaped like a frame. This has the convenience, when laid on material, of showing the effect of the finished patch before cutting is done. And the size of the whole template provides an exact measurement for the amount of cloth needed to cover the paper pattern, which is suitable amounts for turnings. Now, what you're seeing here, so the point she's making here is, and this is great for fussy cutting, she's making the point that these frames that you see on the sides, 2 and 4, that's for the outer, that's for cutting the fabric. That's so that you have what's going to be your quote unquote patch and then the seam allowance around it. And we still have these today. In fact, I think I have a pattern right now upstairs that has both the template for cutting the paper pattern as well as for cutting the material. And so this piece, which is an exact replica of this inner piece, that is what you would cut the template paper. So what she's talking about is English paper piecing. So these two cut the paper, these two cut the material, and then you take, or your fabric, and then you take the paper template and wrap the fabric around it. And that is English paper piecing. The result of increased economy, making it possible to use the smallest pieces, and greater precision in pattern making is important as a development in the traditional method of working. Although hexagon and diamond shapes are illustrated, the same methods apply to all other geometrical shapes. Papers. There is no record of when papers came to be used in patchwork. It is probable that they were introduced with the first templates, but so far none has been found in work bearing a date earlier than 1770. And I'm wondering if that's still true today, or if something has been found that's older. It is also probable that papers were first used in the work done in upper-class houses. Poor people did not write letters, or if they did not receive them in large enough quantity to cut up for patchwork, as paper was an expensive commodity. It is popularly thought that love letters were used in patchwork pieces, but this does not seem to be so. Another, so far unfounded legend is that old wills, old wills, were also a source of supply. School copybooks have been used and often in work made by children. Private letters were used in nearly all of the 19th century patchwork, and some found in a Lincolnshire coverlet had been written by Tennyson to members of his family. Like Alfred, Lord Tennyson? Oh my goodness. I actually have a fairly large piece of old English paper piecing. It's probably from, I'm going to guess it's probably like 1880s, maybe somewhere around there. Although I haven't had a chance to like go through it with a with a magnifying glass to kind of figure out if there's a date I can find. But it looks like all of the paper used in that is, some of it looks like it might be letters, but for the most part, it's ledger paper. So it's like, the husband owns a business and keeps ledgers, and, maybe they keep several years at a time, but older years, it looks like, maybe they're not important anymore. And instead of throwing them out or burning them or whatever, they cut them up to use them for paper like this. Date stamps on envelopes, household accounts, letters, and newspaper pieces can give a slight clue only to the date of the patchwork. But trade advertisements, sale bills, and notices often contain enough information to be a guide as to the locality where the quilt was made. On pieces which are large enough, those cut from advertisement columns of newspapers give amusing and interesting information of happenings as long ago as the 18th century. Traditionally, papers are part of patchwork economy and not cut from sheets bought especially for the purpose. They should be firm enough to resist the folding of material at the edges, but not as stiff as card, although they are often referred to as cards. Well, that's interesting. I never heard that before. Anything thicker than brown paper makes work cumbersome and difficult to handle. Thin card is occasionally used for very large patches. Good writing paper is the best standard for quality, but for quality and convenience in having it kept neatly together, nothing can improve on the directors' reports issued to shareholders in prosperous companies. Well, apparently they were on nice paper. Excellent alternatives, not always acquired without some persuasion, are unwanted architectural and legal papers. So I would say probably those ledger pages are probably like along the lines of these directors' reports and legal paper, legal paper. Good quality paper patterns can be used several times if they are removed carefully from the completed work. It is necessary to remove papers from all patchwork which is intended to be washed. Almost 60 years ago, some patchwork was made of silk and velvet, and the papers left in for warmth. No doubt it was warm and also very heavy and quite unwashable. So I'm going to leave off there because she's next going to get into pins and needles and that kind of thing. This is actually a pretty short chapter, but we'll leave the rest for Thursday. So I hope you enjoyed the quilt the quilt kit to quilt paper by Copeland and Dunavant. I thought that was very interesting. I had not read that one before. Also in that 1994 issue of Uncoverings, there are some other great articles. One I will quickly tell you is about a woman named Mildred Dickerson, and she was a prolific quilt pattern collector. She did not make very many quilts. I think she made a few, but she's primarily known for this massive collection she had. And I mean, like, from every kind of like newspaper clipping, all these different companies, everything. She did all of these round robin trades for patterns, and she was working on this throughout like a big chunk of early mid 20th century. Well, a dear friend of mine was I think knew her. I'm pretty sure knew her, but was in possession of her collection, or part of her collection. And that collection is now, I believe, if I'm correct, is at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln in their archives now. So, that's a beautiful thing for Mildred. I hope she's looking down from heaven and she's very proud of all the work she did is now available for research, for other, fiber enthusiasts and quilt makers. But it was the clue that helped decipher which quilt this is. It is one of the earlier Alice Brooks. And I had said Laura Wheeler, Alice Brooks, but it's specifically Alice Brooks. Because my friend could jump in and look at Mildred's legacy and quickly find in baskets this particular one. So blessings to Mildred, because I don't think I would have taken me a very long time to figure this out on my own if my dear friend Mary Kay hadn't been watching and seen it and said, oh, well, I know what that is. I just have to hop into Mildred's details to find that. And so Mary Kay actually wrote the paper about Mildred in the same issue of Uncoverings. So with that link I put in there earlier, if you would like to read about Mildred Dickerson and the fact that she helped identify this quilt from beyond the grave, give it a read. And I have read that one, and it's a very interesting paper. She's a very interesting lady. So, Marianne's got one more chapter to read before tomorrow night. I got to get my reading done too. So yeah, as a reminder, we're reading this. So hopefully, I think a lot of you are coming to hang out with me and Jill as we read this book. So it's such a good book. It's been really great reading it so far. So we're getting ready to be, I guess, about 2/3. No, not quite that much. About 1/3 of the way through, I think. So, all right. Well, I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and see you tomorrow night if you follow along. Right, nice thick pages, lots of pictures. So I'll see you tomorrow night if you follow along, and otherwise I'll see you on Thursday. put it on your calendar. Don't forget, this coming Saturday is a Stitch and Glitch with me and Jill. So if you got nothing going on Saturday, pencil us in. So have a great week, and I will see you soon, guys. Mwah! Bye!
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.